The Entrepreneurial Journey podcast. We're talking business and building a culture that's kick-ass. Where we make it happen, grab your seat, let's have a blast. At the Entrepreneurial Journey podcast.
For the entrepreneurial journey, I have the author, Aaron Ross, and dad of 9. Hi, Aaron.
Hey, Rebecca.
Welcome. Thank you for your time today. Aaron has written 2 books, Predictable Revenue, here we go, and From Impossible to Inevitable. I've read one of them, Aaron. I read the first one. Haven't read the second one yet. But I want to find out how you got to the point where you are today, because our entrepreneurial journey listeners are often at the beginning or in the middle of building and growing a business.
Yep.
And you've got a wealth of experience to share. Where did it all begin for you?
Yeah, well, I think, there's 2 major turning points. There's more than 2, but 2 that come to mind to start. One was quite earlier than your current listeners, but I still remember when I was in my mid-20s and applying to business school, and they asked me, what did I want to do? And I never really thought about that before because, back at that time, I'm 48. So I feel like when I grew up, people might ask, what do you want to do when you grow up? It wasn't the same as today where everyone's constantly like, where you want to go? And I just never really thought about it. And I realized, wow, I actually want to be an entrepreneur.
Oh, okay.
But the mindset was not, will I or could I, would I? It was like when I start a company. So that was a really important shift. So I think that when you're looking at in having a business, whether it's part-time and you want to make it full-time or small and big, it's kind of like a when, not if mindset. It was a different framing that really worked for me. And then a second point was having a business. It was actually venture funded and failing back in the 2000 internet bubble in the States primarily. And we'd raised, $5 million, and I was still probably 29 or 30 or something. I mean, it's pretty young in the scheme of things. And in that, I learned so much, but one of the things I learned was how, as a CEO, I needed to learn how to basically have, not just sell, because every entrepreneur knows how to sell naturally, but to create a professional sales system, know how to build a sales team. Because I had hired a VP of sales for this company, and it was called Lease Exchange.
Okay.
Basically, online equipment leasing, bidding.
Okay.
So I hired a VP of sales, and he had a sales team, and I really abdicated my understanding to him. I didn't delegate, I abdicated. So I didn't understand really anything about professional selling and sales systems. So when sales weren't working the way we needed, I felt really helpless. I didn't really know what to do.
Okay. And there's a subtle difference, isn't there, between abdication of responsibility and delegation of responsibility?
Yes. So delegation in this case, really, it's doing what I need to do to understand how that function works, and then being able to have someone else do it for me, or with me. Abdication was kind of like, I don't want to deal with this. You do it. I'm just going to sit this one out. And it's great if it works, but if it doesn't work, you're, risk of failure, like what happened to me. So that really was the reason, and if I fast forward a year and a half, took a year and a half off to do other stuff, like a month-long survival trip, an Ironman. But kind of, and farted around, but then went and got a job at Salesforce.com, it's a sales job. And Salesforce.com was around 150 people and 25 million in revenue, give or take. Still, this is 2002, pretty small, still, early days. And the only sales job they had was answering the 800 line, like the most junior job. And obviously the pay, like tiny pay and everything else. And so went from being, CEO of an venture fund internet company to basically like the most juniorish job you can have at a tech company in sales. But check my ego. I just wanted to learn, and honestly, a job can be a great way to get paid to learn. So in doing the dirty work of sales there for a while, that really gave me the insights to create an outbound selling process and sales team to help, almost double Salesforce.com's growth. Out in the book, I called it Cold Calling 2.0.
Yeah.
So wrote the predictable revenue book around that.
Yeah.
But it really also stuck with me. And I share this with my kids, right? We've got 9 kids. Some are old enough to want to, start a business, or they just know someday I want to start a business, or an hour later, and like one 21-year-old wants to start a restaurant or nail salon, something.
Great.
And so part of my advice is always, well, don't be afraid to do the dirty work first. Right? So get a job in a restaurant, get a job in a nail salon, so you know how they work.
Yeah.
And so when you do start it, you'll be, and don't be too good, or be to do the jobs you need to do, or the things you need to do to learn what you need to do to succeed.
So that you need humility, and
that's a good word for it.
Yeah. That's coming through loud and clear. And there are many people, Aaron, that having been the CEO of a tech startup with that level of funding would definitely not have gone back to basics.
Oh. So, and I should say too, so today it's been, by the way, I don't know, it's been a lot of years, but so I'm co-CEO of a $5 million business.
Okay.
And we've got 9 kids, really built that at the same time. So, I feel like I learned a lot of those practices and applied them. I'm not just someone who writes books. I actually did the work to write the books too.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just someone who studies things and writes. But not that there's anything wrong with that. But I just really feel like, and one more example is if you're an entrepreneur, and I know that even in the States, but especially in the UK and Europe, there's a lot of resistance to the word sell or sales.
There is, right? Huge resistance, isn't there? And I've never understood that.
Well, I feel like I get it, because not only are there a lot of the sales jobs have negative connotations because they're manipulative and pushy, and I think that's the exception. Most people are honest.
Yeah.
At least that's what I believe, and most salespeople are honest. But the word sales and also money gets so tied up in our self-worth that it can also be very uncomfortable, just the whole topic of money. I think if you're more comfortable with money, selling is more comfortable. If you're uncomfortable with money, and there's many forms of money, buying, but so it is complicated because it's tied up with like self-worth and also cultural things around sales. But selling and marketing are really a life skill. Like if you want to accomplish anything in life, whether it's starting a nonprofit or building a business, making money, you need to be able to sell yourself an idea or a product. And sales is, again, whether you call it marketing, sales, all these things around helping your business make money. Sales is a skill that you can learn with practice, just like guitar. There's nothing magic about it.
I totally agree. And I only have a mere 3 children, and 2 of them are...
Some people are like, oh my God, 3? How do you do 3? Because I only have 1. Or yeah.
Mere 3. And the 2 older ones who are old enough to work, I've encouraged them to work in a public facing role. So in a shop or a bar or a cafe, because I think that's where you learn the skills of self-worth and selling. When your customer is directly in front of you, there's nowhere to hide, and you get immediate feedback. And I agree with you. I think they're life skills.
Yeah, those are good ones. I have a daughter who works in Los Angeles now. That same 21-year-old works in a grocery store in the deli counter. And first, I'm like glad she got any job.
Yeah.
Especially these days. She got it right before all the COVID stuff.
Right.
But like you can learn anything at any job if you have the mindset to learn.
Yeah.
Which you can, like, even if you get bored at a job, well, okay, that's an opportunity. How do you keep yourself interested in a job even if you get bored?
Yeah.
If it's difficult, bad manager, good manager. So a lot of it is a mindset. I'm not sure in the States, there's a lot of bloggers. It's become popular to kind of bash jobs as cubicles and they suck your soul. And there's something to that, but I'm sure a lot of your listeners can empathize. Being an entrepreneur is no cakewalk, right? It's very challenging. It can be very stressful. It can be very empowering and freeing. It's like a lot of opportunity, but a lot of stress, that roller coaster.
Yeah.
And doing the dirty work for what you need to do, what you need to know in order to make the company successful is part of this. So it can be challenging as you get busier. And I know for me, it's been hard to keep my hand in of like sales. I talk to clients. I don't do prospecting, haven't for a while. I write. So there's different ways, and it's kind of evolved. So I think it's just it's a lifelong lesson. It's like you don't do the dirty work and you're all done. And by the way, with 9 kids, I have lots of dirty work with 9. Actually, we have four dogs here as well. Definitely lots of dirty work. When we're out of the diaper stage for now, but yeah, there's just constant stuff. And yeah, don't be the humility is really important in order to actually make lots of money for yourself or your business.
Yeah, absolutely. So the key learnings from Salesforce are in certainly this book, and I will read this book next. So I'm not going to ask about the key learnings because I genuinely want people to read the books. I found them to be invaluable in terms of they were practical, that you could tell they were written by somebody who'd been there, done that, had those days in sales where you felt like you were wading through mud and not getting anywhere. And that shone through. So what I want to know is what led you to moving on from Salesforce, because you've been hugely successful there.
Yeah.
And what led you to become an author?
Yeah. Yeah, sales like that sales team I created helped add an extra 100 million in recurring revenue within a few years. So in that sense, yes, but internally, I had always been frustrated at Salesforce because I think once I saw myself as an entrepreneur, it's hard to go back.
Yeah.
And I worked at Salesforce for 4 years, and I went there in order of like, okay, I'm going to go there to learn before I start my next thing. So it was always I always saw it as an interim job. So, it'd be like 3 months of kind of creative fulfillment and then 9 months of feeling bored and waiting for things to happen. And like, it was good that I had to deal with that and basically learn too how bigger companies make decisions and what it takes for like executive teams. And I worked a lot with Mark Benioff, like for executive teams to kind of okay things and just how they saw things in groups of people. So I still learned a lot through that.
Good.
But ultimately, it just wasn't a fit after 4 years. So I went 3 years in sales, a year in the mergers and acquisitions, and then they wanted me to go to Ireland to fix some sales teams, and I just was ready to move on. So left and kind of experimented for a few years with things because I knew I wanted to make as much money as I wanted doing what I love, but I just wasn't sure what that was.
Right.
And I think if I fast forward, 2011 was very pivotal. This is 5 years after I left Salesforce because it's the year I got married.
Oh, wow.
9 years ago. So from being 0 kids to, she had 2 kids from a prior marriage. So we got married and she was pregnant quickly. And I never used the term stepchildren. So we had 3 kids or, 2 plus 1 on the way in 2011. And I distinctly remember the feeling of, oh, I got to make more money to support a family. So I was early at Salesforce, but not early enough. And the job I took really had so little equity. I made enough money at Salesforce to like pay off my old divorce debts because I've been married before, and I don't know, like whatever. I had made a little money left over, but it wasn't a lot. I learned a tremendous amount at Salesforce, so I became rich in experience and knowledge and reputation, but not financially.
Okay.
So went back, and in 2011, that's when I decided, okay, I had lit a fire under my butt to really make things happen. So published the Predictable Revenue book, found a business partner. I started growing that business. And so it's really been from under $100,000 to $5 million in those years. And still working about 15 to 25 hours a week that entire time. Because that was just something I kind of really felt strongly about, which is 25 hours a week. If I worked around more than that, I just would lose sight of kind of more insightful ideas. I would get more things done. So this balance between like checking things off the list, but having space to create new things.
Yeah, really.
So I don't know, it's like a quirk. So I have had to make money the whole time, and I have not worked. There are weeks I would work a lot if I was traveling and special reasons, but in general, this, it's 20 hours a week over the years. But having a family is what really was the fuel for my fire to grow and like really like push for growth, business growth, financial growth, and personal growth the last 10 years. And going from 0 to 9 kids, having this business, and seeing my family really not as a distraction or expense or in my way, but really like motivation to be a better person, be a better business person, to make more money. And that really was, I think that's really when my growth started.
That's fascinating to hear that it's so inextricably linked with the growth of your family, and yet you've been able to keep a really great balance that a lot of people would be envious of.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, yes, and yet I worked my ass off as a father, because like between when we had babies, and there was a couple years we had 2 young babies, and I'm sure some people can empathize. I mean, 1 is a lot, but when you have 2, I don't know how people with twins do it. I really don't.
No.
And just nonstop. So, but yeah, I was glad I was able to. I kind of laid the groundwork, in doing the dirty work and creating a new sales approach, and kind of like having this expertise and doing enough to know that when I really needed to, when I published the book, I already had a reputation.
Yeah.
I had a bunch of partners. I had some content. I had some stuff, and I had the kindling, and I could just kind of like light the fire.
Yeah.
So I grew my income by 11x in 4 years.
Wow.
The under 70,000 to 700 something thousand in personal income. But again, I had some starter fluid ahead of that.
Yeah.
So a lot of all this has gone into, especially that Impossible book, because that's really the entrepreneur's book. And I know that for me, like for example, the first section is called Nailing a Niche. And that's really the most common reason businesses struggle to grow, because they're not ready to grow. Yeah. And that was that year for me when I went back and like nailed my niche in outbound prospecting. And there've been a lot of resistance to that. But doing that, and there's other things like partnering, doubling my deal size, a lot of other things that applied for me personally that I've seen work for other SaaS companies or just services companies or B2B companies. It's just interesting. Like I was really an engineer when I was younger and in college.
Oh, is that what you did? Right.
Yeah, that's a lot of my mindset, engineering. And so at Salesforce, like taking a kind of engineering approach towards sales. And these days, it's not even engineering. It's more just looking for patterns. I don't do well with overwhelm or busyness.
Okay.
And so for me, I'm always trying to look at, okay, what are a few things I can do to make a change? And that's really what kind of like the mindset, because I just can't do lots of things. I don't feel like I can do lots of things.
No, and yet society tells us that we should be doing lots of things. And often if you do less, you get so much further faster. Often I talk to my clients about slowing down to speed up.
Yep.
And they look at me as though, you must be crazy. We're going at 1,000,000 miles an hour and that's what we have to do. But I think you're right. Reading your book made me reappraise the niche and get really niche. Yep. Niche on niche.
Especially these days with the coronavirus and everyone, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt and anxiety, which means people still aren't spending, most people are still like paralyzed, not spending money, businesses. And one of the things, for some people, there's not a lot you can do, but one thing you can do as a business is to kind of like even go further, micro niche, like even more specific messages and solutions to kind of cut through the anxiety of others. So that's always a key step.
Yeah, it is. And yet the temptation when there's a crisis is to say, right, we need to sell to everybody.
Yeah, and you kind of need to, it's not sell to everybody. Yeah, the feeling is like desperation, but you need to look at, going back to the beginning, like who should we sell to? Because who we sell to might have changed in the past month, and who is buying and what might be changing.
Yeah.
Or the way we deliver it. I mean, even for us at predictablerevenue.com, we're re-looking at what are the offerings? Do we keep our offerings? Do we change them? So I still do consulting and speaking. We have a few dozen other people who do various versions of outsourced prospecting or consulting. And I haven't done it for a long time. Maybe I should do, for example, like remote nail niche workshops, or just going back towards a little bit towards the drawing board. I mean, this really is the greatest chance people and businesses have ever had to recreate themselves.
It's true. Yeah, it's
so
true.
That's there's a lot of anxiety and fear and problems, but it's also a lot of opportunity right now.
So it's, out of all the chapters in Impossible to Inevitable, which chapter do you recommend people read now at this point in time?
So, and that is the best book to start with for most people. Okay. If you're earlier, if you don't have like a sales team. But I would say the first one, Nailing a Niche, part one, it's really this: how do you think about who your ideal customer is, which kinds of customers need you, and how do you think like them? So there's some kind of workshop exercises in the book, and explanations in the book, because especially a lot of companies are dependent on word of mouth and reputation. And it's time like these where you really have to go back towards, you want to use your reputation, but not be dependent on it.
Okay.
Like, how do you describe what you do in ways that are valuable enough and specific enough where people can just kind of get it without having to know you ahead of time?
Yeah.
That's the first one. There's one other one. I'm kind of conflicted because there's one, part 5 is called Do the Time.
Okay.
It's really more about the entrepreneurial journey. Like, cause you have your feast and famine, your depression, your ups and downs. And we're in this anxiety economy where we're surrounded by other people being successful while we struggle, right? Because everyone posts about success, but entrepreneurs struggle every day. That's the nature of an entrepreneur. And how it takes years longer than you want.
Yeah.
Right? It just takes the painful truth is it takes years longer than you want, whatever that thing that you want.
Yeah.
So that one I think would be more of a mindset change to kind of at least relax and hopefully, hey, you know what? All these problems and the roller coaster, I am where I am because I need to be there. I'm not missing out right now. And it's just part of the journey. And then one of the steps I need to take, like an actionable step, is to go back and work on these nail and niche exercises in part 1.
That's really sound advice. What keeps you going? You've got 9 kids, so I'm not going to ask you what gets you out of bed in the morning.
9 kids, literally. Actually, so it has changed a bit the last few months. Okay, so we moved to Edinburgh in early January. And for many years beforehand, I couldn't say how many, it literally was kids. Like first they would literally get me out of bed, wake me up. And pretty much my days and all my energy was directed towards supporting, like making money for the family, or managing, like playing with family or doing family, or even creating some space and time for my wife so she could do her playwriting.
Yeah, sure.
And what I didn't do is leave any space for myself. In the last 6 months, I was able to get to the gym more regularly. And so now here, and partly because all my work is still on US time, and we're all stuck here at home in a good way. And we don't have any young babies. I kind of finally have a lot more space to have a day to kind of be with the family. In the morning, I wake up at usually like 6, not because I want to, I just do. And I have like an hour and a half to just do some writing, meditation, walking, reading, drawing. No, not reading. So drawing, writing, play a little guitar, like just kind of hobby stuff. And it was so hard to do for so many years.
Yeah.
And it's like early steps. So again, I follow my own advice, or at least I try to. It's really impossible to be anything. As a parent or even as a person, I think just nature is we're hypocritical sometimes. It's impossible not to be. But like going back, and a lot of the advice on LinkedIn I've been giving is like, this is the time to recreate. Like, how can you kind of do things that make you feel better, make you feel creative, take care of yourself, spend time on business to do the stuff you need to do, but don't let that eat all your energy and attention, and focus on things too that you can do for yourself. So I'm doing that. I do feel more creative and kind of more inspired. I'm really not worried about the coronavirus thing at this point yet. I really do believe, having been through a couple economic downturns and even like a divorce and everything always, it's like when you have a big disaster, you can look at it as a disaster, or you can look at it as, basically things need to do a reshuffling. Like there needs to be
We've lost your sound there, Aaron, a sec.
Oh, someone discovered me, speaking of kids.
Okay.
This is Bella. That's all right. This is our new world, right? This is Bella. She's a 3-year-old.
Hi, sweetheart.
And mommy's got 4 other kids, so she can't watch them all the time.
No, they escape. We're lucky my dog hasn't started barking yet.
I know, yeah. So I'm glad you can hear. So I think the point is looking at all this is really, it's a chance. It's like the forest fire that burns down the old wood so that new things can grow. Yeah. That's really how I see this. That's really what I believe. And unfortunately, there are people's businesses and jobs are going to be lost, but it doesn't mean that they're not going to be okay as long as you have your health. It doesn't mean, you're going to be okay one way, shape, or another. You don't need to not be embarrassed.
Yeah.
Like, you let go of the embarrassment part and you'll get through it. Like, you need shelter, you need food, you need people to care of and take care of you. And everything else in your health, everything else really is social dressing or window dressing.
It kind of works its way out, doesn't it?
This is Bellatrix. Yeah. And
gorgeous name.
Yeah. So for the younger people who've, again, you get through it as bad as it is. And then Winston Churchill said, wasn't going through hell, just keep walking. And so if it's really bad, sometimes all you can do is just get through the day. If you can do that, might be a win. And just take it day by day that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Aaron, I'm going to leave you with your gorgeous daughter.
Belly is signaling daddy. It is time.
And thank you very, very much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I think our listeners will appreciate it.
The Entrepreneurial Journey podcast. We're talking business and building a culture that's kick-ass.